Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. So, the burning question is always, can my marriage survive infidelity? And we want to talk about the things they don't tell you when asking that question. So, let's just dive in.
For me, it's it's obviously a very commonly asked question. And I think when people ask that question, can my marriage survive infidelity? There's, in fact, a lot to think about. Firstly, there's various forms of infidelity. What do you mean, can it survive? What do you mean by the word survive? Do you just want to get through it? Do you just want to be together after this whole affair that occurred? And so there's a lot of things that need to be considered. And you need to ask questions such as, why do you want to stay? Why do you want to work through it? And what happens if you work through it? What does it entail? As well as if I decide to go, for example, after infidelity, what does that entail? And what are the steps that is required of both individuals in order to get through it? So it's not a simple answer. The short answer is yes. I think a lot of people would say yes, you can. But also at the same time, don't believe necessarily that's the answer for everyone. I think that every relationship has boundaries. And I think if you discuss what those boundaries are in terms of what's going to actually break up the marriage or the relationship, infidelity is something for a lot of people that would break that relationship up for them.
So, real deal breaker.
So it's a deal breaker for certain people, but it's not necessarily a deal breaker for everyone. But the decision that gets made, this is the important thing, whether you decide to stay or whether you decide to go, that is a decision and a choice that you need to own. And do not concern yourself with what everybody else is doing or thinking, but you need to own the decision and you need to do what's best for you at that point in time. So when people normally ask about survive, I kind of get the feeling that they just still want to be together. And you need to think of it more than just being together. You want to know, can you be happier when you are together after infidelity? And why I'm saying that is because what was the relationship also like before the infidelity occurred? Was it in a good space, according to you, according to your partner? Because sometimes two people are in a relationship and the one thinks the relationship is going very good, or in a marriage, but to the other one, it's not. So how does that misunderstanding or miscommunication happen within a relationship? These are all things that needs to be looked at. Because at the end of the day, the infidelity is the incident. The affair that occurred, that's the incident. And I think people get confused between the incident and the reason behind why it actually occurred. And if you want to get through it, you need to look at the reason behind it, what happened. Because you do not want to go back to a relationship the way it was before. You want to go to something different. You want to work your relationship towards something different, even though it might be with the same person. So it's going to be different, but it might also be better. But it also might not be better. And that's the thing you need to remember. Nothing I say or you say or anyone else says is going to be a complete answer for you. But what we can do is give you a big picture of what things can possibly look like or what could possibly occur. but nobody ever makes that decision for you, because a lot of the time people approach that question, when they ask you that question, it's like they want you to make that choice for them. So if you says yes, your marriage can survive infidelity, then they're going to sit down and work through it. But if you say no, then they're going to say, well, that's it. He said it. I went to a specialist, a coach, a therapist, wherever you went to. They said no, and therefore I'm walking away. But why this is important is because it comes back to what I said about owning the decision, because at the end of the day, nobody's going to live your life for you. Not your family, not your friends, not your in-laws, not your kids. You live your own life. You make your decisions, but you need to own it. And yes, there are going to be consequences to the decisions, and the people close to you are going to be affected by those decisions.
So I just want to talk about you saying, you need to own the decision. And I fully agree with you, because it is your own life. But what happens when an incident like this occurs is, firstly, you go through a lot of emotions, right? And so it's almost natural to kind of want to share it with everybody, what he did, or what she did. And then there's a lot of people commentating, and a lot of the times people want to know what's happening. So what's happened next, and what's happened next. And it doesn't necessarily mean that person really wants what's best for you. It's just a juicy story. And why I'm highlighting this is because it's really important when you are going through so much, not to sort of badmouth your partner, because this could go either way. You haven't reached a decision on whether you're staying or you're going. You are, sort of in emotional turmoil, which means you're not thinking clearly. And we're going to talk about, how you actually make that decision, and a step-by-step guide, kind of, if you were, on how to actually get clarity, assuming you're not working with a coach. But what I do want to say here is that it's so easy to get sort of swooped up by everybody's comments, and then there's guilt trips around, especially if there's kids involved, no, you should stay. How does one navigate that at that time?
How do you navigate all the comments?
Yes, and how do you drown that out to stay clear and stay focused on your path?
I think the best thing to do is, when this occurs, I think your immediate reaction would obviously be very much, there would be anger, and rightly so. But at the same time, you would also maybe want to tell the world what's happened to you, because you see yourself as the victim within this situation and you're looking for that support. But I don't necessarily believe that you should look for that support at that point in time with everyone. So I don't think it's a good idea, for example, to share the whole story with everyone you come across. Some individuals share it with all their friends, their family members, their parents, everyone.
Colleagues.
Right? Colleagues.
Acquaintances. Because
exactly.
you're so angry, you just want to. Or it's almost as if, you're telling yourself, well, this is how I'm getting back.
Yes.
At my partner.
So the best approach for me is to go and see a professional and deal with your anger within those sessions. You could have a very objective view of what's actually occurred. And you can therefore then work through that anger and then see how you want to actually address this. Is it something you actually want to work through? Is it something that is a deal breaker for you? Who's going to be involved in terms of your decision? Who's going to be affected by your decision and the choices you make? Because a lot of people that's going to say to you, stay or go, they're not living your life for you. As much as they say stay or go, they don't live it for you. And this is what I mean. This is a very important decision to own, because it comes with responsibility like all other decisions that you make. Okay, so one of the main questions, and the way the question is always posed, is again that word survive. And I think the question you need to ask yourself is, can my marriage be a success after infidelity? You know, because there's a huge difference between survive and wanting it to be a success. Now, success, as we've discussed many times, does not necessarily mean we're still together. Success means that our relationship is a fulfilling one, that there's happiness, joy, good communication, our relationship is a priority. It doesn't mean that we're still together, and that's a very important thing to note, because if that's the answer that you want, that we just want to be together for whatever sake, and we're totally still miserable within the relationship, then I'm going to tell you no. Anybody can then still be together after infidelity, but if you want the marriage to be a success, then you should probably have worked on the relationship just as hard before that occurred compared to after. And that's the realization that you'll come to in order to build a relationship or marriage where you don't want to leave room for infidelity. That's the priority and the connection that you and your partner needs to have. So that's a very different question.
And a very common reason for infidelity, which is what we spoke about in terms of, are your emotional needs being met, in a previous podcast? And we go through each and, or we go through the top 10 emotional needs and we break it down and we explain why infidelity possibly happens, because your emotional needs are not met. But if you are in a situation where your partner has cheated on you, if you were to just take a moment and actually just reflect, you would look at your relationship. And sometimes that's hard, and sometimes you do need help with a coach to just sort of guide you and actually highlight that for you. But once you understand that perhaps your partner's emotional needs were not met, and your partner's emotional needs could be very different to yours. So you might be feeling like, everything was fine in my world. I don't understand how this happened. But your partner isn't, going out there to see, how can I hurt this person? Your partner has emotional needs that haven't been met, and that has unfortunately caused your partner to go down this path. I'm not condoning it by saying that. I'm just merely highlighting that there was an issue in your relationship prior to this happening.
True.
And if you can own that and then realize, okay, if I decide to stay, I've got to, both me and my partner, commit to working on this relationship, because otherwise it's like doing the same thing, but somehow you're expecting different results. And I think a lot of people do that. They decide to stay, everything goes back to normal, which is we just kind of go through our emotions every day the way it was. But then you cannot then expect that your partner is not possibly going to look at this as another avenue unintentionally down the line, because his emotional or her emotional needs are not being met.
Correct. And I think the other thing we need to keep in mind with this type of question is also, when individuals refer to the word infidelity, there's various categories and kinds of infidelity that do occur. And they would fall into one of three broad categories, usually, which is basically, the first one would be sexual or physical infidelity, where you actually sexually and physically intimate with the individual. The next one would be emotional infidelity, where there's no sexual act that occurred, but you emotionally connected with the individual. This is normally where, for example, you may be exchanging WhatsApp messages, you're having intimate conversations with the individual, and your spouse or partner does not know about this. So that's that kind of infidelity. And then the third one is basically a combination of the two, right? Which is, it's emotional. There's an emotional connection between the two, as well as there's a physical sexual intimacy between the two individuals. So infidelity is going to fall into one of those three categories, and they're very broad, because if you look at the first category, for example, it could have been a once-off occurrence, right? Or it could be an affair that occurred over a period of time, but it was purely physical and sexual. And the second category, the emotional category, is where often men would say, but I didn't do anything. We were just talking. It's still a form of infidelity. I mean, the thing you must remember here is that you kept that information away from your spouse. Whether you did so, the reason you did so, why did you keep that information away? Because you knew it would possibly hurt the relationship. So that means there's a trust issue. And if you look at infidelity in all three categories, it's basically an issue of trust. Trust has been broken. So whether you're sexually intimate with the individual or not, but you're emotionally connected and shared information that you should have shared perhaps with your spouse or your partner, then that's still infidelity. And obviously, the emotional infidelity, there's a good chance and the possibility is there for it to lead to a sexual and a physical relationship with the individual. And that's where we get the combination of both. Now, this is where you were referring to, that if our emotional needs are not met, for example, then we would look to fulfill that emotional need through someone else. Now, if that person is a colleague at work or a friend that we met through some activity or something like that, then the potential for taking that relationship further is there. So let's say, for example, I have the emotional need of recreational companionship with my partner that you need to fulfill as my wife. But you tell me, oh, I'm not into hiking, or I'm not into running or cycling, so you go ahead, you go do it on your own. What happens then is that I go and join a club where I have people doing it, and there's potential friends there that you could have an affair with and start developing a relationship with. Now, a lot of the time, though, this connection what people don't realize is that this connection that you formed with the other individual who's not your spouse, this could be an example of limerence that you're experiencing, where there's this infatuation with a person. It's not like love, really. It's more of an infatuation or an addiction to the individual. Why? Because they're giving you a need that your spouse has not given you. So what happens is you latch onto this individual. You're so happy when you're doing that activity together that you don't realize that this individual that you're with is only really fulfilling that one need. So what happens is your spouse fulfills the other needs that you have, and this individual fulfills that need. And what happens sometimes is that individuals leave their spouse for the individual that is fulfilling that one need. And what happens then is when they eventually gotten a divorce and they're now with this new individual, with this new person, they realize, but this person, things aren't the same. There's other things that my spouse gave me that this individual doesn't give me. And now they're having second thoughts. Why did I leave? Should I have left? So,
and the other thing is also, you met that person, right? And just to clarify, you use the word limerence. So limerence, I like to call it the honeymoon phase. In other words, there's butterflies in your stomach. You're super excited to see this person. When you're not with this person, you're fantasizing about this person. But it is a phase in a relationship, but it isn't the be all and the end all of the relationship. That period, which a lot of us are addicted to because it just makes us feel so good. You feel wanted, you feel needed, you feel really great around this person. But that period of any relationship is short-lived. And then comes the next phase, which we talked about previously, but just to highlight for people just listening to this particular program. The next phase in the relationship, so you get limerence, and then you get
loving attachment,
which is kind of the real stage in terms of you are who you are, your partner accepts you for who you are. And it's a great phase to be in, but it's kind of the phase you want to stay in the healthiest version of it possible. Why I'm bringing this up is because you've met this other person, but that is going to fade. You're going to then start seeing this person for who they really are at some stage. And a lot of the times, that limerence honeymoon phase can last for quite a while. And then it becomes very confusing because, on the one hand, you go home to your partner, but on the other hand, you're sometimes there, but you're thinking about, this person, and this person might. So what you have is this person fulfills one need, your partner maybe fulfills 4 or 5 of your other major needs, and so you're continuously tossed between the two. What we're saying, however, is if you had worked on your relationship prior to this happening, and you understood each other's emotional needs and you fulfilled that, then you're basically building a really healthy relationship, a relationship that will not lead to infidelity.
And the other thing we need to remember is that obviously with these categories, we'll realize that they're not all the same. I think certain people would find it easier perhaps to forgive emotional infidelity over sexual or physical infidelity. So these are the questions you need to also ask yourself. What actually occurred? What are you more comfortable forgiving? What can you forgive? And forgiving doesn't also just necessarily mean, I forgive, that means I can stay. Or I can't forgive, now I must go. I'm sure at some point during the process you will be able to forgive. And a lot of people have been forgiven, but they have not necessarily stayed together. So don't confuse, I'm at the stage where I can forgive with, I'm at the stage now where I can move forward with this individual. I feel that they are two different things. Forgiveness and moving forward with the individual is not the same thing. Sometimes we get that a bit clouded.
And it doesn't necessarily mean it works hand in hand. That's what you're saying. Because it doesn't mean I reach a point of forgiveness that necessarily I have to stay with a partner. You could forgive and understand why it's happened, but also maybe face the fact that the relationship's over. Or you could forgive and feel that you understand why your partner's done that, and you feel this is worth fighting for and working at, so that you're both on the same page in terms of being committed to move forward. And sometimes the one partner is really committed to move forward and the other one isn't. The other one's facing reality that this isn't for them.
And the other thing also to keep in mind is this a serial offender or a serial occurrence? Has this infidelity happened before? I mean, if it was the second time, the third time, I think that you would find an answer easier in terms of your reasoning. Should I stay or should I go? And so those are the things you also need to ask. Is this the first time this has occurred, or is it the second, third time? For some people, it is the second or third time. Which
means then, when you say serial offender, this person is this way.
This person has a history.
The person has a history, but at the same time, if it's happened twice or thrice, there's a strong possibility. I'm not saying it's the only possibility, but it's a strong possibility this person is not going to change unless, of course, this person really is committed to saving the relationship and working on it.
Yeah. So that's why we come with regards to the incident that occurred and the reason. If we look at the reasons you gave earlier with regards to not fulfilling emotional needs of your partner, the incident is the affair. The reason behind it is something entirely different. If you want to move forward with the individual, you need to deduce what is the reason that the affair occurred. And that is not always so easy, you know. And again, when you start delving into this, it's not about blame or where the blame lies. You can't move forward with the individual and still feel one of you or either one of you needs to be blamed, right? It's about taking responsibility. And I think a lot of the time people confuse blame and taking responsibility. Blame for me it's obviously a defense mechanism that a lot of us have, right? And what blame allows us to do is it allows us not to look at ourselves in the mirror. You know, so you're not owning anything. So at the same time, you're disempowering yourself to change the situation or to change yourself. Taking responsibility, however, that's saying, I own this. You know, I have a part to play. The decisions and the choices I've made or not made is the reason why I am where I am. You're not looking at the other individual, you're looking at yourself. And remember, the other individual will be looking at themselves. So there's no need for you to look at them right now, but to first look at yourself. Because the difference, for example, in blame and taking responsibility, if I can explain it in this way, is, for example, you arrive late at work. What do? You blame the traffic. But taking responsibility says, I should not have clicked snooze on my alarm button 2-3 times. There's a big difference, and I think a lot of people get that confused. So taking responsibility is about owning the decisions you make. Blame is about
Playing victim
and disempowering yourself to change.
Because when you blame, it's great, right? It feels great in the moment because it's so much easier than saying, oh, let me reflect within and actually see what I've done for this to occur. Because it's all about cause and effect, right? But what people don't realize is when you're blaming, you just stay stuck. You literally give your power away. Whereas if you say no, okay, and this is the other thing that people need to remember is when I take responsibility, I'm not condoning the behavior. When I forgive, I'm not condoning the behavior. There's a big difference between, a lot of people assume that when I forgive, for example, that I'm saying that behavior is okay. That's not. It's a very big difference. But what we don't realize also when we don't forgive, it is only affecting us. How is it somehow, some people say, I'm never going to forgive him for what he did. Never, ever, for as long as I live. That's like saying a snake biting me and somehow the venom is going to affect my partner. All it's doing is you holding on to that resentment, you holding on to that anger, and it's going to affect you physically, emotionally, spiritually, because you're carrying this heaviness around you. And so talking about forgiveness, then you might think, oh, I've recently found out a bit about this, and if forgiveness is going to affect me, I need to forgive immediately. No, you're going to go through natural emotions, like anger, like blame, like resentment. It's all natural emotions, and I think it's very important to first just accept this is where I'm at. Feel those emotions. Allow it to work through you. Because when you push it aside and you're like, okay, we just need to go into solution mode here. I need to forgive you. We need to move forward because I really want to save this relationship. You are robbing yourself from going through the emotions to actually healthily work through the situation. But at some point, you're going to reach a place of acceptance of what has happened, and that can then allow you to forgive and move forward, whether that's staying with a partner or leaving the relationship.
And we're also not saying, when we say don't blame or take responsibility, I'm not saying that people must look at it let's say, for example, you're the victim in inverted commas, that you need to look at it from a perspective of, oh, I'm going to blame myself now. We're not saying blame yourself. What we are saying is, if, for example, any problem or any issue, in this case, infidelity occurred, and you've processed and worked through the anger, what I am saying is the question you need to ask then is not for example, the question you need to ask, for example, is how are we going to fix this? Not necessarily you did this, you did that, I did this, I should have done this, I should have done that. That's still blaming. And you don't get to resolve an issue by blaming. That's what I mean when we say we are disempowering ourselves to change. So the appropriate question when it comes time for you to do that, and you want to actually work on it, and you actually want to fix it, the question is, how are we going to fix this? That makes you look at and understand then that is work for both of you, because both of you need to change.
And you move past focusing on the problem and then focusing instead on the solution, which
Yes.
takes you forward.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
The other thing that we need to keep in mind is that I feel that a lot of the time, you've highlighted, sometimes people want to work through it too quickly. They want to solve the issue too quickly. They haven't really processed even what has happened. And I find this actually is quite common with regards to the so-called victim in the situation, where they perhaps, I really do believe, they underestimate the amount of work it requires and the amount that it takes from them to actually work through the relationship to get it to a point where the relationship is now a success. It is really underestimated. They think for some reason they just need to be together. But there's so much things that they need to work through as an individual. The trust, the incident that occurred. Why did it occur? What responsibility do I have? What did I contribute towards that? These are all things that need to work. You need to work through. And what I find you need to ask yourself is, what are the reasons that I want to stay, for example, in the marriage? Why do I want to stay? Now, some people will, in fact, stay for various reasons. Some people will say they want to stay for the kids. The kids are still young. Some people might say, but I'm financially dependent on this individual. What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? How am I going to live? There's various reasons. Other people are going to say, well, I love him or I love her. But for a relationship to be successful, it can't just survive on love. There's a lot of things that need to be fulfilled for the relationship to be a success. So you need to ask yourself, what are the reasons that I want to stay? And ask yourself, for example, if you want to go and leave, what are the reasons I want to leave? And look at where you're going to go, how you're going to sustain yourself. Because you do lose a lot in terms of your living conditions, perhaps, or sometimes material things. It's not like you can totally ignore that as well, So these are the things that needs to be answered for you as an individual. If you're asking the question, can my marriage survive infidelity? Do I have what it takes? Have I really sat and think about it? Can we turn this marriage into success? And can I trust the individual again? I don't think the answer is that simple for everyone. And therefore I say people shouldn't be judged whether they decide to go, because they might feel, I don't want to put in that much effort to save this relationship.
I think also you shouldn't be judged if you decide to stay.
Yeah.
Because, you looking at it, perhaps you would say, okay, if I put myself in that shoes, I would have never stayed. And some might even see it as you're weak, for staying. And just to be in mind that it's your decision, it's your life, it's about your happiness. And so you make that decision and you own it and let go of the judgment of yourself for making that decision, whatever it is.
Yes, and it's good that you say that it's your decision, it's your life. You're making the decision for yourself. And what you need to remember is if you're in a better space, then the people around you, close to you, will get a better version of you. Whether that be your kids or your friends or whoever. If you're in a better space, they will get a better version of you. But if you decide to stay, for example, just because of the sake of the kids, but that makes you absolutely miserable, and the home environment is completely unstable, then is that the right decision for you? But again...
Or even for your kids, right? Because kids pick this up.
Or for your kids,
and
yes.
What are you teaching your children? If you decide not to work on it and you're just saying for the sake of them, they know it on some subconscious level. And what you're teaching them is, kids, the loves of my life, this picture you see is the definition of a healthy marriage, which is affecting them because they might follow the exact same path, which is highly likely for some of your kids. So it is your responsibility to do what makes you happy, so that you are also displaying to your children, this is a version of a happy person. And when you're happy, automatically your kids will benefit from that.
Yeah, and that's why whether you decide to stay or go, the work on yourself is always going to be required. You need to work on yourself. You need to develop yourself so that you can be that better mom or dad for your kids. Because the moment you better, they're going to get to see and appreciate all of you.
But that's probably why, we encourage so many couples that come for coaching. And let's say infidelity hasn't happened, but they're not in a good space as a couple. Is what do we typically do is we separate them. Let's work on your personal baggage, because there would be personal baggage from your past, from your childhood, that does come into play in your relationship. And so what we typically do in a coaching situation is we split the couple up, well, not split them, you know what I mean, in terms of coaching them separately, and then bringing them together to work on the marriage, because you cannot also have a successful marriage necessarily if you're not in a good space as a person.
True, and the other thing we need to just also, you need to, and I'm sure people would consider this, is how did you uncover the infidelity? Was it something that your partner came clean about? Was it something you found out through other means, through someone else? Or again, is it a serial occurrence? These are all things you need to consider when you ask yourself, can my marriage survive infidelity? Because I do think sometimes individuals, when the infidelity is out and they're not the ones that obviously told you about it, if your partner's not the one that shared this information with you, then they would be inclined, a lot of the time the reaction is, oh, but I want to work on the marriage. Is it now just because you got caught? So my thing is, I think you need to take time and really uncover, do you want to work on it? And then from there, take a moment and realize what it entails to actually work through this. But because a lot of times people are so dependent on their partners, when the individual says, but I don't want to leave you, they quickly to just take them back, and then they move into solution mode, and then they'll be upset and they never really have to deal with the issue. But the issue will still be there.
Okay.
Right. So what are the steps then that needs to be taken if you decide you want to stay and you want to move forward? And I do believe that the steps are different for both individuals, because there's a victim in inverted commas, and then there's a perpetrator in inverted commas. Okay, so for the perpetrator, the steps that should be followed is to, obviously, the first one would be to stop the affair. Then the next is to sever all ties with the person that you are having the affair with, that you had the infidelity with.
And then to bear in mind that your partner is really angry, so your partner is going to want to ask loads of questions. And you need to be open because you're committed, right, to staying and working through this. So you need to be open to talk about it. Your partner's going to ask you the same question maybe every day until your partner's reached a point where, okay, I've had enough. So you allow time for it and you allow yourself to answer those questions and be honest and forthright and forthcoming, because this is your partner's way of also working through it.
And the next step is to show empathy. And empathy is a huge part of empathy is to listen with understanding, listen to her responses. It might not be the best that you're going to hear from her because of what just occurred, but it's to try and understand where, or her, or him or her, him or her. The thing is to try and understand where they're coming from, to understand the emotions they're feeling, the hurt, the anger. And sometimes it might even be low self-worth. It might even be low self-esteem. So try and understand that and have empathy in how they are processing their emotions. And the best way also to do that is to try and put yourself in their situation. What happened if the tables were reversed?
Because it's so natural for your partner then to say, okay, so I'm obviously, not giving you everything you need. Then they start comparing themselves with the person that you've had this affair with. Oh, she's prettier, she's younger. So there's a lot of inner turmoil when this happens. And so what you need to do is also show remorse and apologize, because it's deep hurt that has occurred here. You fundamentally have broken down the relationship, broken down his or her perception of the sanctity of your marriage or your relationship that you've been in.
And then do not expect quick and easy forgiveness.
True.
Because this is going to take a long time for them to process. Because you must remember, you might have also thought there was something wrong in the marriage before the infidelity occurred, but you never spoke to them, but you were processing it. So what I find is that when the infidelity occurs, your partner might not necessarily have been aware there was a problem in the marriage, hence the infidelity occurred. So now they need to process all that from way back then, including the infidelity. So do not expect easy forgiveness, because there's a process for them as well that needs to be followed. Okay, so now if you decide to stay and you're the victim, so to speak, what are the steps in that case for you? I would say ask a lot of questions with regards to why this occurred, what made them do what they decided to do. Also, again, is to try and have an understanding, to actually listen. I know that people will be fuming, but ask a lot of questions.
Okay, and then the next one would be to balance your rage, because you would experience extreme anger at finding this out and actually, emotionally or internalizing your emotions. And so it's natural then for you to have outward expressions of anger, and it could even turn to rage, because this, it's a lot to deal with, especially if you're on the back foot, especially if you didn't think there was anything wrong with your relationship. You feel betrayed. And so just to balance that with the need for information, not continuously barge your partner with information, or sort of, barge is not the word, to continuously badger.
Yeah.
Okay. To not, continuously badger your partner for information for every second that they're around you, or phoning them at work, allow a certain time for you to Ask those questions, let out your emotions so that they know how you feel, but not have it, continuously 24/7 for days on end, because you are going to drain yourself and you're going to make, the situation potentially worse.
Yeah. So the thing is like when you speak about balance, it's what we're referring to there is to like process your emotions, process your anger, the hurt, if it's low self-worth or low self-esteem. And the best way to do that is to go and see a professional, where you have sessions in order to do that. And I feel in that way you will be able to then balance the rage and the hurt with the information that is needed.
And if you're not able to see a professional, then seek out one person that you know is a confidant. That is not someone that just wants the information to be able to share it with others, because there's probably more people like that than you would find a confidant. But if you've got a really close friend or a sibling that you can just offload on, because what you're doing is when you speak also, you're hearing yourself, which means you can process your emotions much easier so that you can actually come to terms with what has happened, with you. If, however, it is so tempting when you're so angry to just go to every single person, and the negative part of this, as good as it sometimes feels to repeat yourself to every single person, and this person's perception now changes about your partner and they hate him as much as you hate him, is that you might decide to stay, and you can't undo the damage that has been done with all these people in your inner circle, because their perception of your partner has changed permanently. And so by you staying, you also then seem to be a hypocrite. And you can't say, I'm not going to stay, because that could change. It could change from day to day as you work through your emotions. So it's really important to either seek out a professional or to have one or two people in your inner circle that you share with, and just avoid telling every single person, no matter how tempting that is.
Yeah, that's true, because what happens is individuals eventually do get to a point where they've worked things out between them, but the friends you've told, the family you've told, they look at your partner in different light, and so that creates an awkwardness between your family or your friends, between them and your partner, which is uncomfortable in future gatherings, so to speak. The other one is to take responsibility. And here again, we mean that you have to realize, even though this was something that was done to you, you need to look at what was your role in getting your relationship to the point that it was in before the infidelity actually occurred. But more so, what is your responsibility in trying to make this relationship better? What is it that you need to do? Because when infidelity occurs like this and you want to work through it, both individuals need to change. It cannot just be one. Both individuals need to work on the relationship and work on it differently than what they did before.
The other thing is also you allow yourself to talk about it with your partner, to ask questions, but at the same time limit it. Okay, today I'm just talking about it for now, for the next 30 minutes. I'm going to empty out, and then, look for ways where you can also, especially if you're deciding to stay, look for ways to spend time together and not talk about the relationship. Because there needs to be a bit of a balance, especially if you are committed to making this work. So then look for opportunities where you just go out, for the evening. You're not talking about the infidelity at all. You're just reconnecting and spending time with one another. I think that's also really valuable at a time like this.
Yeah, and I think when you do talk about it, though, talk about how it has affected you.
True. So that your partner fully understands the impact that it's had.
Another one is forgive when you feel you're ready to forgive. Don't feel pressured to forgive. It's going to take time. It's going to be a process. So do not feel that you need to forgive. You decided to move on, so you need to forgive right now. You can forgive at a later stage. Obviously, at some point, you're going to have to let it go. Because if you don't let it go, and it's years of way down the line, and you still perhaps, let's say, checking his phone, wondering who he's talking to when his phone rings, that is not a healthy relationship either. And why I'm saying this is because at some point you need to let that go. It becomes like, when you have a clean sheet of paper that you can write on. It's absolutely amazing to write on a new sheet of paper. But when the infidelity occurs, it's like crumbling that paper up and then trying to straighten it out again. You can still write on it, but it doesn't feel the same. That's the type of relationship you're going to have if you continuously hold on to it. So what I'm saying is, once you've resolved and worked through everything, you can't still then throw it in your partner's face. And this is where it comes from. You own the decision, because then you're just moving to blame again.
True. The other thing also is a lot of people might feel that have experienced, infidelity in their relationship is, I just can't move on, and as a coach, I understand that, because consciously, which is 5% of your brain capacity, is I want to forgive, but subconsciously you're still holding on to all that resentment. And so it's very hard to want to just will it, because again, your willpower comes from your conscious mind, but 95% of your subconscious mind, which is where your memories are stored, that's where it's sitting, and that's where the deep-seated hurt is. And so when you work with a coach, you can then go very deep and actually really work through your emotions in a few coaching sessions to be able to let go of that. And that's really important to mention here, because a lot of the times people think, okay, if I've made the decision to forgive, I can just forgive. And sometimes you notice you still feel really heavy. You're replaying the scenario. There's a lot of resentment when you look at your partner, and you just find it so hard to let go.
And then the final one is, and it's not the least important by any means, is to actually find support. Find that one family member that can support you. Find that professional that can support you in terms of developing yourself and allowing you to process the incident that has occurred and process how you're feeling. Find the support. Okay, and then finally, in conclusion, your marriage will be able to get through the infidelity, and you'll be able to have a successful marriage if you both are committed to making the relationship that you have with each other a priority, and you do that when both of you take responsibility. And by priority, we mean the marriage and the relationship comes first, always.